Hello there everyone. Today I want to show you how to make this triple row wire macrame technique. And this is what it looks like up close. So as you can see, you're using some macrame knots, but with wire instead. And it gives this really nice effect. And it's quite sturdy as well. So it's almost like a bangle. And then this is the same technique, but in a ring. And that's just using some finer wire, a smaller gauge. So if you want to learn how to make that, then stay tuned. Now these are the things that you're going to need. You'll need your wire. In this case I'm just using a silver wire, you can use anything. For the bracelet, what I've used is 0.4 mil, which equals a 26 gauge. And that'll give the look that I showed you in the bracelet. For say like a bracelet type one, you could probably use 0.6 mil as well, which will be a 22 gauge. And then for the ring, I used a 0.25 mil, which is a 28 gauge. And for that was purely because obviously I wanted the ring to be a lot smaller. So I used a thinner gauge. And then you'll need your beads. For the bracelet, I use 6 mil beads. You could go up or down a bit in size, but I do find that 6 mil works pretty well. And these are just some hematite beads. And the amount you need obviously depends on the length of your bracelet. And you'll need a wire cutter. And then here I've got some findings, an extended chain, some jump rings, and a clasp to finish it off at the end. And then here I'm using some, they're kind of known as like ribbon ends. You clamp them together to finish off, but I'm going to use them for the wire. And then you'll need some strong glue. I'm using some E6000 because it's an industrial strength and I find it really useful for jewelry making in general, so I do really recommend this glue. So get your things together and then let's get started. So now the first thing that you want to do to get started is you want to get all your wires ready and cut. And like I said, I'm using the 0.4 mil for this. To make, say, roughly about the length of a bracelet, I say to use about, each length of wire will need to be just about 50 centimeters. If you're in a bit of doubt, you can always make them a bit longer. Obviously, say if you're making the ring, you can make them quite a bit shorter, but roughly about 50 centimeters for the bracelet. So measure that up and then cut it and put your measuring tape away, and now you just use the first one to measure the rest. So keep doing this. You'll need 11 of these because that's what we'll be working with, 11 lengths of wire. So measure them all up, cut them, and then I'll show you how to set it up. So I've now gotten all 11 lengths of my wire ready, just roughly about 50 centimeters each. Now what you want to do is set them up. For this I'm using a macrame board, just the big one, because it's really handy to use the notches just like you would do if you were using cord. If you don't have this, there's other ways you can set it up, just trying to figure out a way of setting it up really. But I do recommend if you either have it or you can get hold of it, it's a really nice tool to have. So what I'll do is, I'll show you how to set them up, but I will also just insert a picture of the setup, just because it might make it easier to understand as well. It's not at all difficult, it's just to make sure you set them up in the right way. Right, so the way you set them up is, if you have the macrame board, you take one strand at a time and I'm just around the middle of my board. You grab one length of wire first, leave a bit of a tail. You always want to leave a bit of a tail so you can work with that at the end to finish it off. You put that in one notch, you grab another one, put that in the next notch, so now you have one in each of these two. You can work the other way, I just like working from left to right for some reason. Grab another length of wire and try and make sure that your tails are roughly the same. It's just approximate. And this one you want to put in the same notch that you just put the other one in. So you now have one in this one and two in that one. Grab another length. Again, put it in the same one. So you have 3 wires in this one and still one in the first one. And then continue to the next notch. Pop a wire in there. Leave a bit of a tail. Put another one in the same one. And one more. So again, you have 3 in this notch. So you have 1, 3, and 3. And then the next one, put one in. Put one more in. And yet another one. So you have 1 wire, 3 wires, 3 wires, and 3 wires, and you have 1 wire left, which you're going to pop in the very next notch. So you have 3 wires in each of the middle notches, and then 1 on each of the outside. And now that's how you set it up to begin. And all you do is just fold down the wires at the back so you can lay your board down and start to work. So again, this is a setup of your wires. You have 1 wire, 3 wires, 3 wires, 3 wires, and then 1 wire again at the end. So now we can actually start to make the knots to form the pattern. To do this, the first thing you want to do is you want to just fasten all these 3 wires at the bottom, all of them together. So you just take the 3 and put them into the notch right below the one they're attached to at the top. You start working with this side. You can do, if you want to, just same on here, these 3, also attach them to the bottom so that I don't get in your way. But we'll start with this side. So what we'll need to do is take your middle strands and you want to just separate them. And then leave one of them to also go down and just be fastened at the bottom so it doesn't get in your way. So now you have your wires split up like this. One each from the middle go into each their side. So we start with making knots onto here. So these are going to be basically what's going to be your holding cords. So what we want to do is start off with making some square knots. So you take this outer one, just like you would do a square knot with cord, and you take the other strand from the middle section, and there you have the forming of a square knot. You pull that up and pull it tight. Obviously what you'll find is, because you're working with wire, it's quite a bit different than working with cord. You have to be a little bit more careful because obviously wire can kink and you don't really want that to happen. You want it to be as smooth and nice as possible. And having too many kinks as well can cause the wire to break, so try and avoid that. And then you just made the other half of the square knot. Again, just like you would do with cord. You pull that up and pull it tight so it'll come right and form the full square knot with the other knot you made before. Now do that again. I like doing 2 square knots in this section. So obviously the technique really isn't that difficult. What's more difficult with this project is that you're working with wire rather than cord, because wire does kind of have a mind of its own. But just take your time and be patient and be a bit gentle as well, careful, so it'll work out fine. The other half of the square knot and tighten that. Now that's the first section of square knots on one side. Just get them out of the way a little bit. When you kind of bend wires to get them out of the way, try and not just rip them over to one side, but like gently shape them a bit out of the way. And again, we just grab the one wire we left out from the middle and then the outside wire that's on its own. And do exactly the same thing. Just make 2 square knots. The first half. And just make sure that they're the same level, so they're basically right next to each other. And then the other half of it. And then tighten that nicely below the other one. And then the second square knot. And tighten that. So you now have 2 sections of square knots, one on each side. So the next step is to grab your middle strand that's now on its own, and there you want to pop on a bead. Now it's whatever bead that you decide to work with. In this case I'm using my 6mm hematite. That's coloured blue. And now here comes the step that's kind of just a bit different from your regular macrame working with cord, because you would just possibly use these strands to continue making square knots in here, but that's not quite the effect that we want. So what we're going to do is these 2 that you used, the inside ones you used to make the square knots, we'll need to make them part of the holding cord in the middle. So all you do is just, I like to hold my finger on it just so it keeps its nice shape, like a rounded shape, and then bring it to the middle and fasten it to the bottom so it's part of the other wire where you just threaded on the bead. So all these become your holding cords in the middle. So they're ready. So now what you want to do is grab the ones that were your holding cord on one side, and same as you did with the middle originally, you want to split them up. Now what you'll find is, because you're working with the wire, they will kind of split up naturally, as in one will be in the middle naturally and one will be to the right and one to the left. Try and keep it that way. It just makes it look a little bit nicer. So you split them up. You have 3 separate ones now. The very middle one you attach back down at the bottom, and you leave the outer one to the side, because you'll use that in a bit. And then you have this one ready to become a working cord around these ones. Do the same thing with the other side. Split them up, attach the middle one back down at the bottom, and put the outer one to the side. And now you have these 2 as your working cords that are coming from the outside sections. So what you do now is just continue, make some more square knots around the middle section, and make sure you grab all the wires that are now your holding wires. So start with the first half of the square knot and then pull it up. And what you want to make sure to do here is you don't want to pull it like really tight, because you want to purposely get this pattern, this nice shape to it. So stop just a bit short. And it's also nice that the bead has a bit of movement. And then you do the other half of the square knot to tighten it up, and do one more. You don't have to necessarily do 2 square knots with each section. You could do more if you chose to. This is just how I like it to look. So I'm going to be doing 2 square knots in each section throughout. That's also what I did for the ring. Again, you can make it your own design regarding beads and the wire and the amount of knots in that you use. So there you go. You now have 2 square knots on here. So then the next thing you want to do is you want to come to the next section where you put beads on the 2 outside strands. So what I like to do is you grab this single wire, the outside one, release it, and then you put on a bead and let it fall down, and then you reattach this to your board if you're using a board. And then I normally like to do the same thing on the other side. So detach the outer single one, put the bead on, and then reattach it, because they are now going to become part of what's going to be a holding wires on the 2 outside. So again, now you can see you have this wire, these 2 coming out from the middle. They were the ones you used to make your knots with before. Now you want to make sure you try and get the same shape that you did up here. So what I do again is I like to hold this with my finger to keep its nice curve, and then attach it so it becomes part of this. So these 2 now are going to be your holding wires. Do the same thing on the other side. So there. Now all we need to do is get the sides ready. What you need to do for this is you need to make what's called a half hitch. That's a very common knot as well in macrame. So I'm just going to again adapt it to the wire. All I want to say is just be a little bit careful with this knot, because the way you tie it, the wire can kink quite easily, so just do it gently. So what you do is you have the wire at the top that's coming out from your previous knots, and then you have the wire at the bottom. So on this side, I grab this wire that's coming at the bottom, I take the other one underneath, and then pull it over to my other hand. So now this one, the bottom one, that's above, is going to basically be the holding wire, and the other one is going to be the one we're making the knot with. So what you do is, just like you would do a normal half hitch, just more carefully, is take the working wire around your finger and then pop it through the loop, and try and keep the curves of the wire, because that's what's going to avoid you getting too many kinks. So just do things gently in that. And then you want to gently and slowly pull it up. Both make the loop smaller, but also pull it up here until you get to about the same size loop that you have on the inside. And then you pull this wire back down. Because what you do now is the wire that was your working wire that you just made the knot with, you want to bring in to become part of these, so you're holding wires. Like so. And you do the same thing on the other side. The bottom one becomes your holding wire. You grab that with one hand, and then the other one you take underneath, and that's your working wire, which you now want to make the knot with. So you take it from underneath, put it over and around your finger, and then pull it through the loop. And keep the curves as much as you can, pull it gently and slowly until you get the size loop that you want. If it goes kind of wrong, what I suggest you do, instead of trying to keep pulling it here and there, try and undo it and straighten the wire out a bit and then try again. And again, you want to bring this, that was your working wire, down to become part of your holding wires now. So this is that done, so we're basically now ready to make knots on these two. For that, you want to detach your center section, separate them out. Again, they will naturally go more in one direction rather than another. Try and keep them that way, so the one that's in the middle, reattach to the board, and the other two are going to each their own side. So we'll start with the left. So now you want to just make some more square knots. So these two are now your working wires, and then you want to make square knots on these. So you start with making half a square knot, and pull it up, and again make sure to not pull it too tight, because you want to purposely have these loops to form the pattern. And the other half of the square knot. Make sure you always catch all the wires. And then pull that up and do another one. There, and then shake these out of the way a little bit, because you now want to do the same thing on the other side. Grab your two working wires, one coming from the middle, that's toward this side, and then the one coming from the outside from before. Make your first half of the square knot, pull it up gently until you reach the place that you want your loops to be. Make the other half of the first square knot and pull that up nice and tight, and then you want to do the other square knot to finish off that section. Now, I know I keep saying that you got to be careful and take your time, which you do. You don't have to be too concerned about how tight you're pulling here. Obviously you don't want to pull it like really rip them tight, but you can pull pretty tight because you want them to stay where they are when you're making the knots. Like I said, if you have too many kinks and that kind of thing in your wire, it can end up breaking. But if you try and make sure as you're working with them, you avoid getting too many kinks, and if you do get a bit of a kink, try and catch it before it gets too bad, because then pulling these knots, it won't break the wire. The wire is too strong for that, so it should be fine. And then we've finished off that section now, so we're back to wanting to move to the middle. So the first thing we need to do is release that middle wire, feed on a bead, and then, like we did before, these two that are coming towards the inside that you just made the knots with, you want to incorporate them in to the middle to become your holding wires. Again, as I said, I hold my fingers on them to make sure they keep the shape. And then you need to get your working wires ready. So you release one side, separate your wires, reattach the middle one, put the outer one a bit to the side. So this is your first one, that's now ready. Release the other ones on the other side, separate them out, reattach the middle one, put the outer one to the side, get it out of your way, and then you have your two working wires here that are now ready to form knots in the middle section. So you go back to making square knots underneath this middle bead, just like you've been doing the whole time. Tighten it to the point where you're happy with the size of the loops. Make the other half and tighten that really nice and tight. And then you want to do the second square knot. The last half of that one. There you go, that's the middle one. And now we're back to doing the outer ones just like we did up here. Now let's show you one more time how to do that. So first you want to get your beads on. So you release the middle one, the single one, feed on your bead, reattach it. Do the same thing on the other side, release the single wire, feed on your bead, and then reattach it. And now the two that was your working wires from the middle that are coming out towards the sides, incorporate them in to become part of your holding wires on each side. So hold your finger on there and then attach it at the bottom. Same thing on the other side to make sure you try and keep that curve. And then you're back to doing your half hitch notches on the outsides. So again, the bottom one, the bottom wire you grab with one hand, the other one you feed underneath, and then you take the one coming from underneath, put it over your finger and then pull it through the loop. And then you tighten that until you get the size loop that you're happy with. And pull it back down. So the wire is ready to be incorporated in to become one of the holding wires. Hold on it, put your finger on it and attach it at the bottom. The same thing on the other side, the bottom one is your holding wire. Top one you feed underneath your holding wire and then you put it over your finger and then pull it through the loop. And try and keep the curves on the wire as much as you can. And you pull this to the size loop that you want. Pull that wire down. So first of all that fastens the knot on the loop and then fasten at the bottom so this becomes part of the holding wires on the outside. So again we're now ready to make square knots on these two sides. To do that we need to release the middle section, separate your wires, so the middle one you reattach to the bottom so it doesn't get in your way, and then do one side at a time, start with one side and make some more square knots. And tighten it to the size loop that you want. And do another one. That's one side. Shape them to the side so they're out of your way. And do the same thing on the other side. Tighten it to the size that you want. Make the other half of it. Repeat, do another square knot. There. And then you're back to the middle, that you then release the middle one, middle wire, feed on your bead, and then these two, that was just your working wires, you put them into the middle to become your holding wires. And again, release one side, separate them out, reattach the middle one, same thing on the other side, release them, separate them out, reattach the middle one, and then you have your two working wires again. And then again, you just make another square knot underneath the bead you just attached around the wires in your middle section. Tighten till the loops are about the same size. And the second square knot, so we're always doing two in this one. For this pattern you can choose to do more or less, it's up to you. All depends on the look that you want. So there. So we're now back to these two sides where you need to release the two single wires, attach a bead on each side, and then continue like I've showed you before. And you just continue doing it this way. And then you just continue like I've showed you the whole time until you reach the length that you want your bracelet to be. Now remember that you just need to make it a little bit shorter than the actual size you want because you'll be attaching a clasp and that. But finish off until you reach your desired length and then I'll show you what to do next. So I've now reached the length that I want my bracelet to be, and I'll just show you how I finished it off at the end. All I did was I continued till I reached the length that I wanted it to be, and then I like to try and finish off the same place where I started. So if I started with a bead in the middle, I like to try and finish off with one in the middle. It's not necessary, but it's just if you can. So then what I did is I then reached this point, like how we were working throughout the whole piece, and then made the square knot in the middle underneath, like we'd been doing. But then instead of adding another two beads, all I did was then create another pair of square knots, one on each side. So basically just did these ones down here but without adding beads, and made sure that they were as close and next to the middle one as I could get them. Because the reason for this is we're going to be finishing it off. You want something for your end pieces to anchor onto. so it's not going to slip out. So I'm going to show you now how to finish it off completely. So what I'll do now is I'll detach this from my board, because we're finished with any form of macrame. All we need to do now is finish it off. So detach it on both ends. And there is the main part of your bracelet. And because you made all your knots and it's wiring that, it's not going to come undone, it's completely fine the way it is. So I'll show you how to finish it on one end, and then you just do exactly the same on the other end. Now what I like to do is these wires that you use just to create the knots at the end, they're pretty secure the way they are because you use them to form the knots. So them I like to just cut off with my wire cutters. Because that's what you want to do now, is trim down your wires so you can put your end clasps on. And then with the rest of them, because they are coming out through the middle of the knots, I just like, just to make sure they're not going to go anywhere. They probably won't anyway, but I just take them one at a time and just bend them around a bit. Just fold them over basically. However you feel like. This does not have to be pretty because it's going to be covered anyway. It's purely to give something for your end clasps and the glue that you're going to use to stick onto. That's all this is for. So you do all these. That's all you need to do. And I just get my flat nose pliers before I cut them off to just flatten them all down. Just as good as you can. Like I said, this does not have to be perfect at all. In fact, it's almost better if it's not, because the more twists and turns and kinks and stuff there's there, the more there is for the glue to grab onto. So now I just get my wire cutters again, and I just get rid of all the excess wire. Now what you want to do is get a couple of these end clasps. You can see the shape like this, and you just need to get ones that are wide enough so it'll look nice in your bracelet, because you don't want it to obviously be too short, it's not going to fit, and too long it might look a bit stupid. So get the right ones for your size, and then before we put that on, this is where you're going to grab your glue. And I just do this for extra security because I really don't want anything to come undone. This is where I use the E6000 because it's really strong. I really think it's good for this. It definitely should not be going anywhere if you do this. So all I do is just put some glue on here, just around the wire. Make sure you cover the top, the front and the back. You don't want to put too much on there, because then when you crimp down your end clasp, it's going to just squeeze out. But you want to put a decent amount. Make sure it gets as much into the in between. Make sure it gets as much in between the wires as you can get it. There, that's good. And then you take hold of your piece, you get your end clasp, and then you just put the end of your bracelet in there. Make sure everything's stuffed in that needs to be in there. And then all you do with that is you get your flat nose pliers again and just crimp down this piece. Do a bit at a time, like one side at a time. Clamp it down as good as you can, because you're doing it onto wire and the glue, so you really want it to be on there tight. There you go. And you just repeat and do the same thing on the other end, and then I'll show you how to finish it off. It's now finished off both ends, so all that's left to do is attach your clasp and your extender chain, and then to do that all you do is get your jump ring out, open it up, put it in one end of your bracelet, because these end clasp things, ribbon ends, they have a loop that you can put through, and then on one end you put your clasp, doesn't matter what end you put what on, and you close your jump ring back up, and go to the other end, get your other jump ring out, open that one up exactly the same way. You open it up like a door basically, push it away from you, you don't pull them apart, and then put that in the other end, the bracelet, and then put the extender chain in. Whoops, let's do that again. And then close your jump ring back up. Make sure you close it as nice and tight as you can, so your chain or your lock won't come out. You can always solder your jump rings if you want to. That's up to you. So there. So you do. And then you can close it up as it's ready now. And just, it'll pretty much shape itself. And it's pretty good at keeping its shape. Obviously you don't want to like smash it, but you can store it flat like this. But it's easier than still, when you close it up, it will automatically just go into bracelet shape really. So that's how you finish off your bracelet, and I just want to try and show you the ring up close. Obviously this is using a much smaller gauge of wire and smaller beads just to purely get it down to a ring size. And the way I finished this off, so if you can tell right here, because obviously it's a ring so you want it to be continuous around your finger. All you do is you reach the length that you, or the size that you want it to be, and then all you try and do is join up your ends right here so it kind of blends in with the rest of the pattern. You can start to see it, but really you don't notice it that much. So you just kind of try and blend in your wires to secure it, and this won't come undone at all. This is nice and secure. So that's another option. Please feel free to give it a go yourself, and hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for watching.